Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, March 14th, 2025, and today we're going to talk raw biochar, converting a field from alfalfa to gardens, and the importance of being annoyed. And it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, well, welcome to Friday, everyone. Yesterday, I went ahead and got 3 beds of onions planted. Looking at the forecast, I felt good about it. I have one more to do, but I can hold off on those for a little bit just to make sure that the weather is good to go. This morning, I got up early and watched the UK game from last night. It started at like 9:30 p.m., which is not an hour in my life. Anyway, I nearly had a heart attack this morning and then went outside to see the blood moon, which was absolutely a wild swing of emotions from anxiety to complete awe. It's easy to forget how incredible this planet is that we live on sometimes, but nothing like a good blood moon to remind you. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where I look back at this week's topics and see what you all were saying. On Monday, we talked about what are the easiest vegetables to grow, and as expected, what you all think are easy are not necessarily what I would say are the easier ones in my context. A few examples. At Brenton Walters wrote, quote, Vancouver Island, so mild and wet, easy veg, carrots, kale, bush beans, chard, kale, zucchini, more kale, etc., end quote. Or our buddy Dwight Yoder 4883, who wrote, quote, cowpeas and okra are quite easy to grow here in zone 9A. Or on the other end of the spectrum, at Shawnee Grows, wrote, quote, I would like to vote that perennials are the easiest crops to grow. I am in Minnesota, so my list is asparagus, strawberries, raspberries, apple trees. Otherwise, I would say bush beans, green beans, radish, dwarf sugar snap peas, lettuce, cucumber, potatoes, end quote. So yeah, one farm's clash is another farm's treasure. I think that's how that goes. Thanks for all of those, you all. It was really fun to read that. On Tuesday, we talked about garden location, and Groomers Zero mentioned, quote, I was surprised that you didn't mention east/west row direction for sunlight and for ventilation, end quote. Thanks for the comment. But no, I didn't talk about plot layout as much as plot location, because plot layout is sort of a different monster. Generally speaking, how you lay out your beds has less to do with the orientation to the sun and more to do with drainage and ease of access. Most of the tall crops that most of us will grow, like corn or tomatoes or pole beans or whatever, those that could shade out the other crops, usually you're doing that when the sun is highest in the sky, and any shade cast will be minimal or even useful. Airflow out in the field is definitely not something I worry too much about, unless you are in a pocket that gets absolutely no air movement, like in a bowl, for instance. Now, if you are building a tunnel, I prefer to have my tunnels facing southwest here, facing like towards the wind, where that's where our wind typically comes from. So that just makes it so that broadside is not exposed to the worst winds. I also prefer the tunnels to be on the north side of the property, so they are not affecting the light too much on the other side of them, on the plots below them, though not every plot gives you such a luxury. But mostly I'm concerned with where the garden is set up, more so than the orientation. Then on Wednesday, we discussed beets, and I liked this from at Cheesy Belize, who wrote, quote, totally agree with people mostly wanting red beets. All the others are niche at best, just like orange carrots. They're popular because they're the best. Does anybody really want a yellow carrot? Also, I see in lots of your harvest clips, you harvest and bunch in the field. In my 17 years of growing, I've found it much easier/faster/better to go in the field and pull the crop and then take it to a processing area. This does a few things. It gets me out of the sun faster. It gets the veg out of the sun faster, preventing drying out / hard to wash clean. Instead of 30, 45, 60 minutes of up and down harvesting in a bunch in the sun, I'm up and down to harvest for about 10 minutes, and then I'm in the shade rocking out. Yes, sometimes I'll end up one beet short or a bunch or something, but not a problem. Love to hear some other perspectives on the infield harvest /bunch versus get me out of the sun bunching, end quote. So yeah, great. Thanks for that. I have done both harvesting everything and bunching it in the shade. And then I've also done a lot of bunching in the field. And I just find for our system, that bunching in the field gets the job done faster in most cases. I think the lean adage is add as much value to the product when it's in your hand as you can before setting it down. And so for me, I'd like to get it as ready to wash in the field and not add another step, like not have to pick it back up. That said, there are times when harvest is running behind and I just have to get stuff out of the field so it doesn't melt. So I think either way is fine, but if at all possible, I'd prefer to just go ahead and get it done in the field and as I go. And also I agree with your opinion on yellow carrots. I find yellow carrots, purple carrots, they're pretty, but they are roasting carrots. They don't taste like much of anything on their own. So yeah, great comment. Also Wednesday, at Cartafly wrote, quote, "My guy, why the hate on American cheese? 2 episodes in a row," end quote. Yeah, sorry about that. Quick story. Growing up, I spent most of my childhood thinking I just absolutely hated cheese. To the great disappointment and dismay of my parents and grandparents. But it turns out it was like a total miscommunication with me in my mouth because it wasn't cheese that I disliked, it turns out. It was the sort of tangy, soft, edible plastic that we call American cheese. So joke was on me, I guess. Finally, yesterday we talked about farming in a frigid climate, and I liked this from at Kirsty Pollock 6811, who writes, quote, "I chuckled to hear you say over 50 degrees north. That's the entirety of the UK and Ireland, all the Scandinavian, most of Germany and Poland, though the ocean and the Gulf Stream do mean a lot of the west side is wetter and warmer than a lot of the same altitude over in Canada/Alaska with much less snow," end quote. Indeed, I basically was like, yeah, it sometimes can be really hard to grow in that 50-degree latitude or north. Obviously, that depends on which 50 degrees north you're talking about. Indeed, it is so hard to generalize about the world when it comes to weather and latitude. Portland, Maine, for instance, a large city in one of our coldest states, is on the same latitude, 43rd parallel, as the warm city of Marseille in the south of France. And according to Google, at least, the coldest city in the continental U.S. is Grand Forks, North Dakota. It's on the same parallel, the 47th, as Seattle, Washington, where the weather is extremely temperate and it rarely snows just 1,100 miles to the west. So naturally, advising people on how to garden all over the world is super easy. Anyway, great stuff as always this week. Massive thank you to all of our commenters and contributors and question askers. You all rock. Best comment section on YouTube, and it's not even close. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and up next, alfalfa fields, raw biochar. It all comes together, or it may not. All right, BRB.
I just want to go out on a walk with you. Baby, you know I just like to talk with you. You don't have to tell me anything that's new. I just want to go out on a walk with you.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by So Right Seeds. So Right Seeds is an heirloom seed company that offers fresh, high-quality, open-pollinated seeds. They have a great selection on their website of over 400 varieties, along with a planter's library with tips for growing. They offer cover crops and bulk packs of seed for sustainable home gardening. The instructions on the back of their packets have all the information you need to get started. Go to So Right Seeds, that's S-O-W, and use my discount code NOTILL for 15% off your order. That's SoRightSeeds.com. All right, enjoy the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Lars Kroom, who writes, quote, "Hey Jesse, big thanks for all the work you do. Your podcast and No-Till Growers have been huge inspiration over the last 2 years. As a result, I find myself now planning to convert an established 1-acre alfalfa/grass/weed pasture into a dedicated garden space. Are there effective no-till termination options for alfalfa beyond tarping, or tillage going to be the best route? I'm not in a rush to get a food crop in this year and want to focus on setting myself up for best success in coming years. I have a BCS with flail mower, rototiller, and rotary plow available to me. Along those lines, I also would ideally incorporate biochar if tillage is recommended, but don't have the budget for much compost, $120 a yard in my area. My plan is to till in raw biochar, seed 3 successive cover crops this year, and hope it inoculates in place. Does that make sense, or would you recommend a different approach? I do have a new small flock of 10 sheep and a couple of chicken tractors that I could rotate through the area, assuming they would help in the process. I should have plenty of self-made compost next year to top dress the rows as well. Appreciate any insights and thanks again for all you do. End quote. Okay, well, awesome questions there. Thank you. So there are really two main questions here. How to prep ground that was in perennial alfalfa, plus is adding raw biochar to a new garden plot a good idea? Cool. Okay. Per usual, there is no one right way to do any of this, and if I were standing there looking at the plot, I may have a different opinion or idea, but I love this question and will do my best. First, let's start with the alfalfa. As you suggested, the options without a very heavy mulch layer are effectively tillage or tarping. If you do not plan to use tarps regularly, then I would not buy tarps just to not till. That's a lot of plastic and a lot of money. Indeed, I would start with working in any amendments you intend to use through a good, well-timed plowing with that rotary plow / tillage event, then begging forgiveness with cover cropping and sheep rotations you alluded to. Alfalfa can be hard to kill, so it may take some persistence. I think your plan to do so many cover crops right there is the right call to really knock the alfalfa back. You may even want to mow it a couple times really low to the ground just to knock the alfalfa back down as much as possible before setting the plow to it. All right, now with the raw biochar, for the listener, a quick refresher that biochar is like specially made charcoal that is very tiny and wildly porous, and it can lock up nutrients if it's not inoculated first. It's the soil equivalent of shoving a bunch of saltines into your mouth at once without any water. Raw biochar can just lock up the soil and make it impossible to grow anything, which unfortunately includes your 3 successions of cover crops. So if you have access to large quantities of biochar but do not have equivalent quantities of compost to mix with it, I would try to find some way to inoculate the biochar at least to some extent. That could be pouring compost teas or extracts into the biochar, which I assume is in some sort of super sack or giant tote bag of some sort. If you could afford a yard or 2 of nice compost and can mix the 2 together with the tractor, that would help as well. There is also some positive research out there in terms of adding biochar to feed for livestock and how it could improve the soil, but also the animal's digestion. But I'm hesitant to suggest that yet without having really read through the said research to understand how to employ it and circumstances under which it would be effective or not effective. That would probably make a good segment on its own, in fact, so I'll note that for later. Alternatively, perhaps you layer the biochar on the field and run the animals through there a few times. Between the manure, rain, and soil microbes, etc., the biochar will slowly inoculate before being worked into the soil with your rotary plow or whatever. Generally, I'm all about biochar. It can be an excellent amendment, but allowing the soil to do the amending, albeit possible in a field like that, I imagine, could take some time. However, this also depends on how much biochar we're talking here. If it just works out to be a sprinkling per square foot, then I'm probably dramatically overthinking it, and you can just go ahead and work it in, build any beds you plan to use, if you plan to use them, and then start your cover crop successions. But if it's going to work out to like a layer, like, I don't know, arbitrarily, maybe like a 1/4 inch or whatever, you would definitely want to inoculate that first. Again, no one right way to do any of this, and check the comments for ideas from other listeners, but yeah, great question, and wishing you the best of luck. Sounds like a cool opportunity. Otherwise, we're going to take one last quick break, and when we return, we get annoying. Be right back. Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Harnwah Greenhouses. Harnwah Greenhouses has pioneered controlled environment agriculture since 1965, partnering with market gardeners and farmers across North America to deliver turnkey greenhouse solutions. Their unwavering mission is to support growers' success through innovation and expertise in design, manufacturing, and installation. Harnwah Greenhouses are engineered to withstand high wind and snow loads, providing optimal brightness, increased yields, rapid ROI, and long-lasting durability. With over 20,000 projects completed, they are more than a manufacturer. They are a trusted partner. Their structures foster sustainable, energy-efficient ecosystems that drive profitable, resilient agriculture. In 2025, Harnwah is introducing a new low-tech, high-tunnel model starting at just $2 per square foot, offering open field growers an accessible entry into controlled environment agriculture. Learn more at harnwah.com. That's HARNOIS.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so Hannah told me this phrase that she heard the other day that has stuck with me. And forgive me, I don't know the original source of this quote, though it has a distinct Dipin Palmer feel to it. But anyway, the quote is, Something to the effect of being annoyed is the price of community, or annoyance is the cost of community, or something like that. The idea being that when other people are involved, inevitably there are going to be things that are said or done that are, annoying, for lack of a better term, that get under your skin, that bother you, that take your time, or sometimes you will have to do things or go to places or hang out with people you don't really maybe are not super enthusiastic about, but that's what community requires. Dealing with that feeling is the cost of being a part of community. Because, frankly, being annoyed is an inevitable reality of being around other people. You're not always going to want to go to that birthday party. No one is going to get along with everyone or agree with everyone. Rarely, but really never, is there something that 100% of people agree upon. I often say there's no such thing as common sense because everyone's perception of what is sensible is not shared. And sometimes people get annoyed with me for saying that, but I guess that annoyance is the price of listening to the show as well. So in that way, we can expect people to do things that seem insensible to us, but probably seem sensible to them. And that can be annoying. As a society, it feels like we have begun to turn almost wholly away from any amount of social discomfort in our lives in a way that we frankly couldn't before. We actively seek out groups of like-minded individuals, generally online, and deflect or lock out those with whom we disagree, which I think has lowered our tolerance for what we would consider quote unquote annoying, and simultaneously decreased our ability to manage those situations diplomatically. In a world where I believe we won't just see more collaborative farms, but need more collaborative farms, those skills of tactfulness and tolerance are going to be wildly important, as are, to be sure, things like empathetic communication, sometimes referred to as nonviolent communication or NVC. That doesn't mean we need to pretend people are not annoying or tolerate toxic or harmful behavior or try ourselves to not be annoying, but rather we have to learn to better tolerate it if we want to coexist, which we kind of have to if we're in a collaborative farm, the board of a nonprofit, in a neighborhood, at a job, on the planet, everywhere. I also think reframing it that way, as a form of rent almost, makes it slightly easier to process. When something is frustrating, but the objective is clear and desired, like when I want to, harvest salad greens, but it's raining outside, I will suffer the frustration element, the rain in this case, to achieve the goal, the salad. But in society or in social settings, if the goal is not defined, then it just makes the annoyances annoying and not part of the path to success. Having a clear objective, like a successful farm collaboration perhaps, or a community garden, or whatever it may be, helps to make the hard social stuff easier. Perhaps recognizing that sometimes you will have to be put into less than fun situations, annoying ones, as it were, to achieve the goal of community helps make those situations more manageable. Anyway, does that spark anything for you all? Let me know. And otherwise, it's the freaking weekend, y'all. I'm just ready for it at this point. Ready to party. And by party, I mean hang out with my kids and probably watch soccer and college basketball relentlessly while also tinkering around the farm, because that's how we roll in our 30 teens. Oh, and a reminder that every year we do a college basketball bracket challenge for March Madness. So I will post that in the show notes. The official bracket goes live on Sunday. So just a heads up, be on the lookout. So I'm going to wrap it there and get started on this weekend. Don't forget, we are now officially a 501c3 nonprofit, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers, including our longtime editor, Michael Sellis, who does freelance editorial work for podcasts and etc. So if you're starting a podcast or you have a podcast, you can learn more at sellissoundworks.co. I will link that in the show notes. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soul Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of March, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, where do they go? Oh, we got some weeklies. Randall Duran, Maina, and Stephen Smith. And they are joined by Danny Casillas and Danny, and Sarah. And so this is the story of a handful of lumberjacks. They were lumberjacks, but they were lumberjacks at the time. This was, let's say, 1989. Seems appropriate. And they were out in the woods and they ate some wild blackberries that were out there, but it turns out these were not blackberries. They were magical berries, and the magical berries made the lumberjacks be able to hear the trees talking, and they could actually not only hear them but understand them. And so obviously this makes their job more or less impossible, but also it makes and they all end up changing their lives and fighting for the trees. But it also alerts them to how potty mouthed trees can be, which is a little known fact. And also their accent is weirdly Scottish. So you learn something every day. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you on Monday. Bye.